The MGB MX5 project is dragging its heels the last couple of weeks. There's a few parts that I should have probably ordered a little bit earlier and been a bit more organised. I'm waiting for a laptop cable, which I didn't know was broken. So meanwhile, the salt and the winter is kind of finishing up here in the UK. So it kind of made sense to go get myself another daily just to potter around in for the next few weeks. Most people would have gone for a Nissan Golf or a Vauxhall Micra, but I decided to go for not a DMC DeLorean, a BLT J'ADorean. What year are we in and the flat cap's cool again, yeah? I broke the first rule of buying a car and I went to go view it at night. I took it for a short test drive, and despite this thing throwing up more red flags than the history of the Monaco Formula 1 race, still decided to take it away against my better judgment. Right, let's wake the neighbours up, see if she starts first time. Red light, what's that? I'm gonna go with oil. It's not ideal. I pulled over to check the oil levels and there was nothing obvious that I needed to fix, but this of course meant that I had to start the car again. Come on. Come on. Come on, there we go. I got to work fine in the end, and on my way home decided to stop on one of the back roads just to show you what we're dealing with. This is a 1983 Volkswagen Scirocco MK2. Most of the MK2s came with a rubberized wide arch body kit. This one doesn't have that. I'm okay with that, as I quite like a narrow car that you can really throw around the narrow British back roads. Overall, externally, it's generally pretty solid. I would replace the bonnet if I was keeping it, just because it's heavily rusted on the interior strengthening panel. The passenger door could use attention on the bottom edge, and for some reason somebody cut off the rear valance and that's letting the back end of the car down. The interior is definitely a love-hate part of this car. I quite like the brown leather trimming, the red bougie seats, and of course the shag pile carpet, which is in surprisingly good condition other than two small holes on the passenger floor. The dashboard itself looks like it might have been removed in the past because of these poor panel gaps. I can't imagine they are Volkswagen factory, but my main bugbear is the roofliner front section is hanging down and in my eye line when I'm driving, so that'll be one of the first things to address. The engine bay has seen obvious signs of neglect, both mechanically and aesthetically, and of course that's going to be high on my priority list. The first two jobs that I need to attack, however, are the blowing exhaust and the leaking fuel tank. So, I'm not sure why the exhaust's leaking. Can't quite put my finger on that. Looks like it's held together with someone's t-shirt. And as for the fuel tank leak, it does. Oh, look, here they are. That all looks alright though. Other than the fact that, that's the breather for the fuel line, and some clever sod has put a, there you go, it's not even connected, you see it up there, there you go, look, you can see where it's supposed to be connected. Put my money on that, where the fuel's coming out. I cut down the frayed end of the fuel line and reconnected this using appropriate hardware before attacking the exhaust. as I knew I'd be cutting with the angle grinder and didn't want sparks flying around where there was fuel. After cutting off the Ye-Hard exhaust system, I found a piece of steel pipe the correct diameter, wedged it onto the manifold, at which point Naomi got back from work and we decided to empty the boot together. This is always one of my favourite parts of buying an old car. Sometimes you come across some real treasures or things that people have forgotten they've put in the boot if they just use these cars for storage. However, there's always a few questionable items that you'll find on the way. Ah, I hope he just had a really good diet.
I don't want to know. Don't want to know.
Underneath the boot floor, there was a couple of sheets of plywood that would come out for some weight saving and also the spare wheel. I went back underneath the car to weld up the exhaust whilst Naomi de-wipered the boot lid. And whilst it's not the cleanest weld by any standard, at least now the rest of the exhaust is attached. And I shouldn't be waking up the neighbours. But having a look under here though, there is some poly bushes. The brake lines did get replaced, but obviously with cheap brake line, so they're rusting already. I don't know how long ago it was, but they look pretty bad. Up there. After some intense diagnostics, I thought I'd take the air cleaner off just to see what might be causing the carburetor to run poorly. I mean, the fact that it's not even bolted down at all, the carburetor is there. I don't know why, but I think that might be related to the running issues. Got a feeling it'll start first time tomorrow. To see what we were dealing with and whether it could be repaired tonight, I took off the carb adapter plate. There's a nut missing from the throttle cable. Oh, this thing just gets worse and worse. I did 70 mile an hour in this thing last night. That's the scary part. Part of me at this point, it's like, just to get around tomorrow, if I can order an adapter plate, I wonder if I should just ratchet strap the carburetor down. I had a quick chat with my friend Ryan Dixon, who has some old Volkswagens local. After describing on the phone and confirming that he also had the same carburetor and that he had one of the rubber adapters in stock, I quickly flew round, but only to find out that the Volkswagen Golf uses a slightly different inlet manifold. Thanks anyway, Ryan, for trying to help out. So we'll do what we do in all times of crisis. This is going to be 1,000 times better than not having a carburetor. You could use black polyurethane sealant here as well, just so that it wasn't obvious what you'd done. That's not really what we're all about. I noticed that the spare cylinder head came with an inlet that was slightly different to the one that was on the car. That has this plate that I assume is some sort of temperature sender. Perhaps the small spikes on this piece help with the torque curve, but they won't do anything for the top end peak power. I went back to the car to remove this piece, however it became apparent that due to the spikes on this piece, you couldn't actually remove it in situ. So I refit everything as it was, including the new glued together carburetor adapter, in hope that it would get me to work for the next couple of days. Found another problem. Distributor's loose. So I just broke down at the side of the road because this fuel line came undone, and I managed to pillage this clip from the fuse box to hold this line on, because for whatever reason the previous owner didn't believe in Jubilee clips or any. Oh, there's one clamp on there, but it's not actually functional. So I nearly didn't give him credit where it was due, but yeah, this thing's, and this absolutely baffles me. Look at all this mess of cables. They're all like interwoven in some sort of, why not just run them nice and neatly? You've got one fuel line that comes in here, and then the other one goes back over the top to the same place. It's like, just strap them together so they run nice. Anyway, look at the length of this choke cable. It's ridiculous. Probably wrap that around the equator and then some. So that can come off for a lightweighting. I always find it quite baffling that people aren't willing to just spend a couple of hours cleaning up an interior or an engine bay before selling a car. You can see in the 3 weeks of my ownership, doing a little bit here and there, how it's gone from a really scruffy looking engine bay to being a nice tidy one.
So with the distributor being all over the place on this, what I'm going to do is set the timing using the timing gun. So for that you need your front of the engine's usually cylinder 1, not used to front wheel drive. And you need to find a positive and a negative, which is easy when you've got the battery at the front here. And then what you're going to need to do then is find the timing mark on the engine. Now apparently, if you look through the hole on the gearbox cover here, there's like an indented groove, and then there's a mark on the box which you'll line it up with, and then when that is 6 degrees before top dead centre, which is apparently where the distributor wants to be. So if you put the car in gear, take the handbrake off and just rock the car. So we've just gone past there. You can see that mark wants to marry up. In fact, I think that's pretty much bang on there.
At this point, I wanted to start the engine up and set the timing, but unfortunately the car wouldn't start for whatever reason. So I started having a poke around, just trying to fix some obvious bits.
These issues we're having were no the ignition related. Because if you look on the inside here, with it being a Weber, you see the fuel getting squirted down there. So that's why Weber carbs always start better when you just pump the gas once, because the little fuel squirters give you a good chunk of gas. I just whipped all the plugs out and none of them look any good really. They all look like they've been running super rich.
I swapped the plugs out and then started following some wires back from the ignition box. I came across this issue for the earth for the ignition box, where there's a connection that's broken, but also you can see that the terminal's not even tight. This was the underlying issue. I must have knocked this wire whilst connecting up the timing light negative. On to trying to tidy up the exterior, there was this random patch of yellow primer on the roof, which I decided to rub back using paint thinners and clear coat over to make the damage look less obvious. Next under the chopping block is the interior headliner. You can see now just how bad this is, and as I mentioned, it's in my eye line whilst driving, so a high priority for me. I'm removing the sun visors, but as it's the time of year where the sun stays low for prolonged periods, I'll probably fit some form of sun strip.
Look at that. It wants a bit of something, but it's better than that thing all being dripping down in my face. While we're in here as well, I don't know why people seem to like leaving these on lately. I don't know if it's hit that point now where it's cool, but it's one more thing in the way of your windscreen view, and I'm not about that. Don't know what to do about this glove box, and then all these grills are absolutely knackered. I don't know why. There's grills here, they're everywhere. More grills than McDonald's in this thing. So I've parked up roughly where this wiper wants to go, but it's got this awkward kink in it. So I'm going to take the arm off and try and straighten that section out. I might have to weld a piece in, I'm not sure yet. I'm going to try and get the wiper to park as central as possible. If you just go into this rain tray, undo the nut on the top there, just slacken it, and if you come round to the car and put the wipers on, because by slackening it you'll have moved the park position. So if you just turn your wipers into the on position, and then when they park, now that the bolt's slackened, what you need to do, whip this guy off and then park the new, put this in the new position with the desired park location. And put the key in the ignition again. When the window wipers stop, should be in the vertical position. There we go. What I need to do now is just modify this arm so that it's got no kink in it.
It only took a couple of minutes in the vise to straighten this out. I cleaned up some of the rust and then put some black paint on it And whilst that was drying, I decided that I wanted to take the fog lights, but also the overriders off the front of the car. Whilst a lot of people like these, they're not really to my styling and lightweight ethos.
So that's the fog lights taken care of. Next up, these washer jets on the overriders. They look horrific. I've had a look and that chrome trim looks like it goes behind. So I'm hoping there'll just be a hole which will look miles better than that bloody abomination sticking out. From what I can gather, it's these two bolts and then the whole bumper will slide forward.
Unfortunately, at this point, the camera died, so you won't get to see the bumper without the overriders on until later. But I will make it up to you by sharing these nice set of OZ wheels that I bought for the Scirocco. They're stickered up OZ Type 15B. I can't really find any other information on the internet or find another set for sale, so I'm unsure on value or rarity. But they are marked up for Opel and BMW. It's a long time since BMW have used a 13-inch wheel, so I'd imagine the 70s, 80s wheels. Because of the wheel offset and concerns regarding arch clearance, I wrapped them in some narrow 13-inch Toyo tyres. Unfortunately, I couldn't get these to seat with the airline, so it would have to be a job for tomorrow after work, trying to blow them on using hairspray. Day 3 of ownership saw some fresh registration plates get delivered, so I started off the evening's activities here. Whilst behind the registration plates, it makes sense to clean up what you can. Next job was attempting to blow on the tyres using the hairspray technique. Unfortunately, the tyres are just way too thin for the rim. I don't have a bead blaster, so I came up with this new technique of cutting a piece of rubber fuel hose to the correct diameter to make a seal between the tyre and the rim. As the tyre then starts blowing onto the rim, you've got to quickly remove the rubber fuel line to allow the bead to seat. After getting all 4 tyres on, I made the switch around. The car still needs lowering, but as I was tight on time, I left it at that ride height. But you can see here how the front looks now with the overriders deleted. I'm still not sold on the quad headlights and narrow front grille.
So which one of these do you think's the bulb for the rev counter then? So, bulb's up in this top corner. I've taken the one out of the clock because I'm not really that bothered about the clock working. I take the taco over the clock. I bet this goes in. Oh, how can it go in that easy and be that difficult to get it out? 7 days it's taken for this rubber to turn up. So every day I've just been putting more and more Sikaflex onto here, or some dodgy knockoff version of Sikaflex, and it's just been getting worse and worse. But it's managed to get me to work and back, which is the main thing. But now it's time to pull the inlet off, swap out the version of the base plate there that doesn't have the little spiky bits on for improved airflow. Not ideal for taking these out then, but as soon as I had a spare one anyway, I've just absolutely smashed the death out of all of these with a hammer. It took me less than 2 minutes to take that off. So I wouldn't recommend doing it that way, but if you're going to have to, you'll see that I just put some rags up on the intake system to stop anything going in there. We might as well do a bit of part matching and just get the most power out of this that we can. See that there's quite a bit of clumsy rubber. A nice big radius there will help with the airflow into the inlet manifold. Right, I'm running out of daylight a bit. Just noticed that the carb gasket that fits on the base plate to the inlet is missing. So I'm going to make one of those. I'm going to opt not to open Pandora's carburetor just purely on the fact that I've kind of had enough of messing this, and to be fair, once it comes onto the secondary it actually pulls really well. I'm plenty happy with how it's running otherwise, so I think we'll go for a spin. If we need to rebuild the carburetor, there's 2 spare ones that came with it, so I could just rebuild them, tart them up and then swap it. So things have got very interesting. It's very easy to get all of these jets mixed up, and it would appear that somebody else has put the primary side inside the secondary, but only some of them. And top tip here, Trying to get these jets out and they're stuck. Pipe cleaners are your friend. You can see that that one's stuck in there, the body's stuck. So I'm just going to use the other one to determine what size screwdriver would get it out. And you can see that that's slotted right out. And if this is an F30, which it is, it's in the incorrect location. So it might have been trying to give it too much or too little fuel at the bottom or top end if everything's backwards. So I'll just check the specs again. So it's as I suspected, they are the incorrect way around, the main jets and the emulsion tubes. So I'm just going to swap those around and reassemble everything back up, taking extra care to make sure that everything goes back in the correct place. Easy way to determine which is your primary. Usually the choke's on the primary, but if you look, the jet actually marries up with the Venturi tube on that one and then across here on this one. And also another way to check, when you first open the carburetor, you see how the one here opens first and then this one. That indicates which one's your primary, and then the secondary goes in now. So primary on this side, secondary on this side, which means the main jets were correct but the idle jets were incorrect, which might explain why there was a little bit of lag on the throttle when you press that down. So
the Scirocco was actually running great after all the changes with the carburetor and the intake system, so I took some time out to do some styling mods. I've seen a few people suggested online that you might be able to use a Mark II Golf front grille. I managed to find a good used badgeless version that was cheap enough that I didn't mind cutting it up.
Initial mock-up's pretty good actually. There's a bit of a gap here, so I can't quite get these trim clips on, the original ones, because of these tabs here. What I'm going to actually do is just open up that slot so that this actually slots in, and then the clips on the top, and the bottom's actually held in pretty well, but I will put a couple of clips on the bottom as well. But yeah, loving how that looks. The previous owner, or one of the previous owners, used these lovely coach style bolts with wing nuts everywhere. So when they rust up, of course they start spinning and you can't actually grip the other side, nor can you actually get a good purchase on them to undo them. So don't do that, just don't do it.
After closer inspection, I noticed that half the fasteners for the front headlight buckets were missing, so I went through and screwed those on the best that I could, and then secured the new grille in place. It might not be to everybody's taste, but I always like cars with a long, wide grille. I think it makes the whole car look wider and closer to the floor.
So now that that new grille's on there, it's just highlighted even more how pale and off black these bumpers are. So I've been recommended some of this stuff by a friend of mine, Stu. So I'm going to give this a whirl and just see how we get on.
I did 2 coats on the front and rear bumper in the end, and after 3 weeks I can confirm that the bumpers are still looking just as fresh. I bought a 500ml tin, and I'd say that you could probably do 50 bumpers with this. In hindsight, I'd have bought the 250ml tin. I wanted to finish the service that I'd started. I'd already done an air filter and a fuel filter. Now it was time to do an oil filter and an oil change.
Always, every time. Shit. A point to note here is always use a tray that's big enough, because now I've got to somehow try and get this guy out and balance down the socket there just to keep everything level. That's going to be fun. There's going to be oil everywhere. I guess I don't have to worry about spilling oil when I do the filter now.
I got some cat litter down to try and soak up some of the mess and filled the engine back up with oil. Whilst I'd already made a mess on the driveway then, it seemed like as good a time as any to degrease the engine bay. I just use an industrial degreaser in a spray bottle, agitate it mildly with a brush, and then rinse it all off. The next morning you can see how good the results are. With the car reliable and performing well, all that's left to do is go for a drive. I'll never have claimed to bought a good example when I bought this car. I bought the bottom end of the market, the cheapest Scirocco that I could find on the internet anywhere. But yet, despite it being an absolute nightmare from terms of reliability, it's actually been a pretty incredible car. I can see how these might have stole your heart back in the day. I know the Volkswagen Golfs have got a massive following, and I feel like they're probably a slightly better car in terms of space and practicality. The roof line on these Sciroccos is very short. I'm only 6 foot, and the headline has seen some activity when I've been going over big bumps. The back seats are as much use as a toffee hammer, but the boot space is actually incredible. I went to pick up 4 wheels with tyres on the other night and managed to squeeze them all into the boot. Didn't even spill over onto the back seat. If it wasn't for other commitments and other cars, I think this would be a very sensible daily driver for myself. It feels plenty powerful enough. It's only a 1.6 engine, and I think that 85 horsepower from factory, but it still feels incredibly quick, probably due to its lightweight. From what I gather, they left the factory around 900 kilos, which is featherweight really compared to any modern hatchbacks. I've never really been the biggest Volkswagen fan. I can appreciate them, and I have owned a few over the years. I've had an old Volkswagen Beetle on air ride, and a Corrado VR6 as well, which was a magnificent car. I'd have another one of those in a heartbeat. This Scirocco's only a gap fill car, but I can definitely say that I'd have another one in the future. Thank you for tuning in and watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and as always, I appreciate all your support.